Right, we're joined by Mike McGinty, he's come bearing gifts. We've got Aberfeldy, Craigellachie and Royal Brackla.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Lovely to come along, lads. I've been wanting to do this for a while.
Yes.
We saw you guys at other whiskey shows, and it's great to finally get down and sit and talk to you. Mike, I'm actually the Distillery Ambassador for John Dewar Sons, so I get to host the VIP trips up to Aberfeldy, to Craigellachie, to Royal Brackla. So it's a awful job, but someone's got to do it.
So tough. Dewar's is quite famous on the podcast, otherwise known as Divars. My Indian father-in-law was quick to tell me. Or we've also had people talk about Dewar's.
Dewar's, we get along.
Dewar's, Divars. That was a favourite for mine. But yes, I mean, I've visited Aberfeldy Distillery.
The home of Dewar's.
The home
where,
of...
the barrels spell it out.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Absolutely love it. So how long have you been doing all this for?
I've been with Bacardi, so the overall action company is Bacardi. So I've been working with Bacardi now 6 years, where I looked over the whole portfolio. So not just whiskies, but tequila, gin, rum, absolutely everything. And then now for the last year, basically bang on a year now, I've been the Distillery Ambassador, so just focusing on the whiskies, which is just great.
Great. And do you get to travel around quite a lot? Are you around about, or do you predominantly as a Distillery Ambassador, are you more distillery bound?
More distillery bound. So travel a lot, but a lot of Scotland.
Yeah.
Right. Don't often tend to leave Scotland.
Right,
so
okay.
we do a lot to Aberfeldy, Speyside with Craigellachie, and then up to Nairn and Royal Brackla.
Brilliant.
Maybe about once a month we get to do that. So,
yeah, good. And are you working predominantly? Are you dealing with like tourists coming in? Are you dealing with, or is it trade? Are you mixing and match?
Big mix. So completely different. I mean, mainly we're bringing in people from key markets for us. So North America, USA is a huge market for Aberfeldy and Craigellachie. We get a lot of internal guests from there. So Bacardi staff, whether that's the ambassadors or the sales teams from North America, but then we can also get wholesalers that come in from different markets like Taiwan and from China and Japan. So it's a real big mix of internal Bacardi staff and then key customers across the world.
Brilliant.
Really. Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at the three brands that we've got sitting on the table here. Three big distinguished brands.
Storied brands, I would say. Well, I mean, all three of them. Maybe Brakla's only kind of come on the scene more recently than the other two. But I mean, Aberfeldy. I mean, Craigellachie. You can tell by the bottle. It's one of these old names in kind of Scottish whiskey. And I mean, maybe just tell us a wee bit about each three of the brands.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess all three of them have a really rich history, and we could sit here for hours just talking about each of the individual distilleries and their backgrounds. But actually, as an individual distillery, they were used mainly for blending. That's why, because they're all very old. They're all well over 100 years old.
Yeah.
But as a single malt, we've only really seen them in the market since about 2014, 2016, when Bacardi rebranded these as a single malt and released them as a single malt. Before that, you would have been lucky to see some Aberfeldy in like Flora and Fauna range. You would have seen some of Craigellachie in independent bottling.
Yeah.
And you might have seen the old Brakla bottling. Everything was at 40%. It was all Oloroso finishing. It was in that blue label. So since about 2016, Bacardi have revamped these.
Yeah.
And they've now become, a brand on their own, and a single malt on their own. But to jump a little bit on the history, Aberfeldy is the only distillery that was built by the Dewar family. It was built in 1896. So we're at about just over 125 years of history. One of the few distilleries built by Charles Doig in the Perthshire region, so not much has changed there on site. Still got a wonderful visitor centre. Highly recommend trying to go up there and visit. It's one of the better tours,
I've been,
as you said. Yeah. The other two, unfortunately, they're the mecca for whiskey fans. Still closed. Yeah. Craigellachie opens very rarely for Spirit of Speyside Festival. So I do recommend keeping an eye on that. But Craigellachie, again, late 1800s, built by Alexander Edward and Peter Mackey, so both forgotten founders of the whiskey industry. Two guys that did loads, Mackey with Lagavulin, Malt Mill, and then Alexander Edward had Ben Rimis, Oban, Dallas Dew, Ben Riach, so loads of them in his portfolio. So both a wonderful whiskey distillery as well.
Craigellachie gets this sort of name as being meaty as a whiskey. And that's the one thing I know when I remember kind of starting out tasting a lot of different whiskies through COVID, like a lot of people. Basically, I was like, right, I'm going to get fired into this. And I remember everyone talk about this meaty whiskey. What is it about Craigellachie that makes it meaty?
An absolute unique style of whiskey. At the end of the 1800s, there's a guy, Arthur Bernard, who travelled Scotland and England.
Wrote the book.
And wrote that book. And he wrote about a style seldom met today. Really old school style. And that's what Craigellachie is, and we've kept that. Now, 2 reasons how we get that really meaty character. The stills, they're small, wide, dumpy stills. So no reflux, everything's going up and over a declining linarm. And then we have those worm tub condensers, right?
Worm tub condensers.
So 1 of 20 distilleries still boasting the worm tub condenser.
Someone who listens to the podcast will be able to sit down and name every single one of them. They put the challenge out. Was it Conor O'Keefe that asked?
Yeah,
or was
I
it?
think it was, yeah.
It's a good challenge. I think I always know a lot of the Diageo ones have them, and then it's the other ones that you're trying to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
That's my way to try and remember it. But with Craigellachie, we have quite a slow condensation in that worm tub condensing, because it does matter how you run your worm tubs and the character you're going to get. And what's cool about it is we're condensing as the vapour goes down through that worm tub, so you're almost getting separate condensings, almost creating separate spirit styles, which gives you that real interest and depth of flavour and meatiness to it. Absolutely.
And if it was old in 18, whenever Bernard wrote his book, I mean, it's old now.
Yeah. And we've been very lucky, like generations have worked in that distillery. One family have worked there basically from almost when we began to where we are today. Yeah.
Nice. So it's kind of my father's worked here and his father worked here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the Nicol family. So a gentleman called Jim Nicol, and he's Jim Nicol Senior, and then 3, I think, more in line that have worked there at the distillery, and that knowledge is passed down. Somebody was asking me today about whiskey, and they're saying there's 3 ingredients, and I said, well, there's 4. The 4th is the human.
Right,
the human
right.
touch, and that's what Craigellachie really boasts.
So what about Royal Brackla then? It's a distillery, I'll be honest, I know absolutely nothing about.
Brakla's an interesting one. It was a hated whiskey immediately,
right,
locally, because in 1812 we were paying tax, which wasn't the cool thing to do, right? And in the region we were in, there was a lot of illicit distills, and the locals didn't like us. So Captain William Fraser, who was the gentleman who founded Brakla, he actually started exporting it to London. And it was in London where it found its fame, and people began to really like it. And it was all about the sherry, this exporting the whiskey in the sherry casks. And that was actually where we managed to get the name the Royal. The King started drinking it, loved it. It became known as the King's Own Whiskey. And it's 3 whiskies now that actually boast that name Royal. So there's us, Lot Nagar, and then Glenurry Royal, this is the third. So still very proud of that.
Having that Royal sort of stamp of approval must have been, even back then, you say that was a huge thing.
Huge, absolutely. I mean, especially in that period where whiskey was quite unregulated. So how do you know what's good and what's not? Well, if the king's drinking it, it's great. But Brakla went through a bit of a revamp about 5 years ago. Where before the core range was all 40% chill filtered, and it was all Oloroso. Now we've got a range from 12-year-old, which is Oloroso. The 18-year-old, what we have here today, is the Perlo Cortado, so really dry, nice and salty, nutty. And the 21-year-old is finished in 3 sherry casks. So it's all about the sherry. Now Stephanie wants a whiskey that holds up in that sherry cask, but what she's able to do that's so good is the balance between the whiskey and the sherry itself.
Brilliant.
So sherry, Brakla's all about that sherry.
I think we had Alex Thompson. Right. I think he spent a bit of time working at Aberfeldy, I believe.
He did.
And he talked about working there.
He spoke a lot about Aberfeldy.
It's fantastic. As a distillery, as I say, I visited it. I tried. I did a wee tasting when I was there, and it was it's 2 different wine cask finishes. Was it that? Is that the 18 or the
18 and 15?
Yes, it would have been the 18 and the 15. But also, I actually walked out with it. It was an Altmore 10.
Oh, it's very good.
Well, this is, you haven't got it here today, but Altmore is part of
the portfolio. Yeah.
And Altmore, I bought my dad a bottle of Altmore for his birthday because, we tried, it was an independently bottled Altmore. We tried, it was a rare find one at a tasting we were at, and it was absolutely superb. I think it was about, I can't remember too much about it, 16-year-old in bourbon, I think, but it was just...
But that Altmore 10, I remember being at the shop and the guy in the distillery saying, look, this will be sort of, once it's gone, it's kind of gone. It was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. But in terms of... I also remember it's the Distillers Fair. We tried the Aberfeldy that had been matured in Scottish oak.
Scottish oak,
the 9-year-old.
9-year-old Scottish oak. Really nice bottle of whiskey. One of my, I mean, in that sort of period, it was one of the favourite bottles of whiskey I ever had. It was absolutely superb.
Absolutely, and it was interesting because Stephanie, when she did it, she was like, Stephanie Cloud, the master blender. She's a bit questionable of Scottish oak.
Aye.
She's always said I found like it's like chewing on a fence post. Which is an interesting way of putting it. So she tried a younger whiskey with it, and she's like, oh, I love it. Kept it at cask strength. It's a distillery exclusive. But it's brilliant. And what's cool about the story for that one is we chose the tree. It came from just outside Stirling.
Oh, really?
We felled it. It went up to Speyside Cooperage. They raised the cask for us. So to be able to have that like knowledge of where it came from is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned Oakmore, and all I can say is a little hint. There could be a Scottish oak influence coming from that one sometime soon. So keep your eyes peeled on that one. Keep your eyes peeled.
Right, well, we've got the 3 drams here. What's been the real popular ones today then? What have you sort of seen shifting around?
So I brought the 3 that I thought were actually doing really well today. So we have the wine cask. So we do, every year we release a different Aberfeldy at 15 and 18-year-old in a different wine cask. Now, the one we released last year is the 15-year-old Semillion cask. So a dessert white wine from Bordeaux.
Right.
Now, white wine isn't often used, and it's not a widely used cask for finishing. This one for me is phenomenal. Just about 14 months in that white wine cask for it. You think it'd be really sweet. What you get is this like creamy peach and honey note. Please, help yourself. You get this wonderful creamy peach and a honey note that runs through it. Almost like a peach Kranikin.
I'm looking forward to that, because we are now
Just a wee bit.
the second session is now underway.
Yeah.
People are walking
It's
past.
beginning to flood in now.
Yeah, people are streaming in. But
So for you, whiskey festivals must be a big part of your job as well. Then is this something we saw you at the
Whiskey Fringe.
Whiskey Fringe.
Whiskey Fringe, yeah.
So how important is it for you guys when you're doing these festivals to try and get your liquid out to as many people as possible?
It's so important, right? Because actually, I'm glad we're trying the 15-year-old because it's a good question for that. A lot of people don't know what a Semillion cask is, right? And it's been something that we've noticed using a unique wine cask that maybe people don't buy into right away. It becomes a harder sell. But at shows like this, we're able to give that taste, right? Without having to invest in the whole bottle.
Yeah.
And that's allowing us to get a wider range of whiskey into people's hands. In a sad marketing way, it's called liquid to lips.
Oh,
right, and we
know
really
the
are,
phrase.
and that's what we're doing here. But not only that is what I love about the Scottish shows is you see a lot of repeat people, right?
Yeah.
So you're building basically what I like to call is ambassadors for us.
Aye.
People that love it. For example, now as we're saying hello.
But I mean, you're right. I mean, people. We've seen a few familiar faces today. Familiar faces as people that are exhibiting, but also familiar faces of people that you're going, I've seen them before, and they're going, I've seen them before. There's those daft idiots that talk shite about whiskey.
We all do.
But you do also make a good point, is that we're all, most people will be familiar with obviously what a bourbon cask is and what an Oloroso cask is, but the Semillion isn't something, and you're right, if you were seeing that on the shelf, without having the knowledge, without having tasted Semillion cask, well, I don't know what Semillion cask is, so I'm not going to buy the whiskey.
Yeah,
exactly.
Therefore, unless I'm taking and think, well, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's about education as well.
Absolutely, it's a leap of faith saying I'm going to buy a 700ml bottle of whiskey and not know what it's going to taste like.
Retail at then?
That's around about the £65 mark.
So
the 15 and 18-year-old are done every year. They're still a really good, reasonable price mark. But even so much so with the some of the older stuff, so the 18-year-old Brakla, you're looking at about £120 a bottle. So it's an investment.
Yeah.
Right, but you can come here, you can try it. That's the big thing for us, right? It's really getting everyone to try that range. So
I'm going to quickly tap into this Craigellachie. Get a bit of meat.
Yeah, I think
Get a bit of meat in the bones.
the 17 for me is my
Graham was getting a
favourite.
bit hungry, so he didn't get a steak. But
Talk us through, Mike. This is the first time, second time we've ever exhibited at a whiskey festival. We were guest exhibitors for Glenwillis Distillery last year
at the Fife Whisky
Fife
Festival.
Whisky Festival. But this is the first time we've ever had our own exhibiting station. we're a bit late in the day for asking for advice. We're also a bit too many.
Smashing it, boys.
We're also too many drams deep to really make any difference. But I mean, how do you get yourself? I mean, it's a long old day. I came through to see earlier on at the end of the last session. Your colleague, I think this is her first time. She looks smashed out of that. And, I mean, what's the process like for you?
For me, it's all about hydration. Keeping hydrated, drinking as much as you can, water-wise, and snacks. You definitely need snacks to get you through it. But I try and buzz off the energy of the people that are here, right? And their excitement for trying the whiskies and getting in front of the whiskies, and try and use that energy to keep you going throughout the day, because it is over 8 hours of standing. You almost rinse and repeat, isn't it? It's like you're just saying the same thing over and over. But I like to try and take that little bit more time with people, explain what they're having, as long as they want to hear it. There's nothing worse than boring someone with what they're drinking. And I think they get a lot back from it that way. If you take a bit of time with the customer. As I said, for me, it's all about people buying from people. So I want to be here. I want to see the same people over again. I want to catch up with them. There's my partner's just walked in.
It's famous. But I mean, this festival is quite unique. For people who are listening and not seeing where we are, we're at the turning point. And it's
people
fascinating. People can. A lot of people come in. They go up the left-hand side of this to see all the distilleries that are up for grabs, and they come up to us. They see us talking utter nonsense, and then they take a right, turn away again. But it's a hugely unique kind of thing, and the surroundings as well. Being at Murrayfield,
it's really
great.
cool. I've done one in Murrayfield and one in Hampden now, so we're ticking off all the big stadiums.
All the big stadiums. Well, you'll need to come to Starks Park at some point.
Exactly. I'm up for that one. But what I think is good is we actually get an insight into consumers' habits as well, right? Because I always get the question, what do you recommend now? What I recommend is every single whiskey on this table.
Correct.
But what do you drink? And you begin to actually see into people's psyches and what they like, and the overall trends within the industry. So that for me is really invaluable as well.
Is there any trend at the moment that you think is quite prevalent? Something that you're seeing a lot of coming through right now?
I think...
What are people talking about?
The one thing that I've enjoyed a lot in the last, say, 3 years or so is the change away from people going, it's a sherry cask, to now naming the particular type of sherry.
Or Oloroso.
Or the type of wine.
Exactly.
You're saying with your Aberfeldy one there, it's X-red wine. And now you're hearing people say it's Rioja, or it's or even things like the type of wine regions that you're getting at. If I remember correctly, it was one of them. It's one of the American wine regions.
Napa, probably.
And you're saying like that. And again, from a consumer point of view, you're right. You hear like ex-sherry, but then there'll be people that we've had people on our Indie Bottle Spotlight. It was Woody's did one, and they said we don't know. It's an ex-sherry, but the cask that we bought, we didn't have any information on it. And then you've got one guy at one side of the room going, it's definitely PX. You've got another guy at the other room going, no, it's 100% Oloroso. And you can see now there's that sort of element of people, but that's what was so exciting about when we tried the Scottish one, because you're suddenly going like, this is a completely different flavour style. What I would say going back to that is, having spoken to other people about it, Scottish oak, it is a nightmare apparently.
It's a nightmare.
For maturing whiskey.
I mean, you just have to look at the tree itself, right? So when we use European and American oak, they grow tall, they grow straight, the branches grow further up the tree. So there's less knots, there's less leaking, right? If you look at a Scots oak, it's a gnarly tree, right? It's going at every different angle, so you don't get as much wood from it, so it's not as economical, it's not environmental and sustainable. The coopers here in Scotland, well, anywhere, have never really used that wood, so it's trial and error. It's very much like Mizunara, the Japanese oak, is the same, pretty difficult and pretty prone to leaking. So people are cautious when using it. There's nothing worse than putting whiskey in there and then coming back and it's all just leaked out.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And I suppose on the other point of view as well is that because not many, it's not a commonly used oak for maturing and making casks, everything that you'll be doing will be virgin oak. So you can't actually say this is like an ex-bourbon in a Scottish oak cask. And then that's why a 9-year-old is probably just as good, because the flavour that you're drawing out of that wood would be too much if you went any further.
And you need that like younger style of whiskey, a bit more aggressive to balance it out. And that's what Stephanie does really well. It's always balance in all the whiskies. You know, because we look at you go, 9-year-old, right, cask strength, oh geez, that's going to be big.
Yeah.
But it needs it to be in that virgin oak.
Yeah.
You know, and she knows that. That's what's the balance and the art of it.
Well, I can't wait to tell my father-in-law who's over in Bangalore in India that I said I met a guy from Devars and he was telling me all about it because it's great.
Yeah.
But, right.
If I could ask you one more question, just kind
Sure.
of going back to your day job, you're saying you're taking, you know, people from the company around these distilleries. I mean, what a fantastic job that is. But, you know, obviously Aberfeldy we know is open, Altmore, Craigellachie, Brakla, not so much.
Yeah.
Is there anything at those distilleries, or even at Aberfeldy, that impresses in particular? Is there something you enjoy showing these, you know, clients or people in the business in particular? Is there something you...
Yeah, I think probably the three, Brakla and Craigellachie and Aberfeldy, are the best ones to talk on. Altmore's been going through an expansion, so I'm not even allowed anywhere near that yet.
Right.
Hopefully we'll be back in there soon. First of all, we'll start with Aberfeldy. We get to take them to the water source. That's always a really fun and unique thing to do. And what we do down there is we have a hot toddy with the new make spirit.
Oh, lovely.
And it's just a really, really nice way to introduce it all. So one of my favourite parts to do. Craigellachie, it's the worm tubs, right? I've seen a few worm tubs. They're normally in wooden barrels. You see them from below, but we get to take people up above them. So the steam is even just coming up through the grates
cool.
while you're standing over them.
What's the smell like at a worm tub?
It's brilliant. Yeah, so many notes. And the last one for me, Brakla, is the view. And I know it's a weird thing to say, but we have this wonderful pond outside the front of Royal Brackla and these roller windows that went in the expansion in the 60s. And it's just such a picturesque view.
Well, it was almost poetic there as a native.
Yes,
just
I know.
Walked past at the very point you were talking about Brakla, a friend of the show as well.
Shan's always on me trying to get up into Brakla.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pour a wee Brakla and then we'll have a wee chat about what we like.
Shan and I ran bars together about 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So where did you work together then? Which bars in particular?
99 in Aberdeen, we worked together for a while.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And then I actually worked with Jody in the Voyage of Buck here in Edinburgh as well. So both of them, actually.
So is it bar work that got you into the whisky industry then? Is that the sort of area that... So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a well-trodden path, isn't it? You speak to people like Jody, Shan, there's so many people we've had on the podcast. What we tend to find is it's either some sort of like mechanical engineering or working through bar trade that people end up in the whisky industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, nobody that studied accounting has ended up as an engineer.
Honestly,
we don't need them.
We've had like Jody's a classic. Well, Jody and Shan are the classic examples because Jody was he was an engineer offshore.
Yeah.
Now he's in the whisky industry. Shan went through the hospitality industry, the bar trade, is in the whisky industry. But it's fascinating because there seems to genuinely we've had 3 or 4 people on the podcast when you speak to them. And there must be something to do with like the mechanical concept of building flavour, and it genuinely is a sort of engineering process. Then on the other side, you've got guys like yourself who've worked through the trade. You know what consumers, and it's dealing with the consumers.
Yeah.
That everyone has a different angle that they approach whiskey from. Some people, like myself, I'm a romanticist. My wife might tell you differently, but
That's right.
but I love the stories, I love the concepts, I love all that kind of stuff about it. But then you get someone like Jake Adcock, who's sort of assistant blender at Ian McLeod Distillers. He's no interest in history, no interest in stories. I'm all about the process.
Yeah.
Tell me how the whiskey's made. Show me worm tub condensers. Show me line arms.
Exactly.
All that kind of
all
stuff.
the geeky stuff.
Yeah. But it's great. Right, I'm going to try this Brakla. Angus, how are you finding that? Just now?
Yeah, no. So
I poured you a Brakla there.
Yeah, I'm on the Craigellachie, so I'm having my meaty moment. So
get your 2 veg in there as well.
I think with the Craig 17's that perfect spot between the new make spirit, because I know it's still saying 17's, relatively old whiskey.
Yeah.
But as we're talking about, that's the way we make Craigellachie. It's quite a fiery new make. So the 17 is a good balance between the cask relationship and then the spirit itself.
Yeah.
You get like banana bread and a bit of like Christmas spice coming from the sherry. A big fan of it. And the Brakla 18 using the Paolo Cortado. I love it because it's lighter than the 12-year-old. So it's challenging that perception of age. And then that salty nuttiness that comes from the Paolo Cortado.
And it's 46% ABV as well.
Yeah.
You're not hiding anything there.
Not hiding, no chill filter, no caramel colouring.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Mike, that's been fantastic. Thank you so much for first of all, thanks for coming on, but thank you so much for the drams as well. That was great.
My pleasure.
Mike,
My pleasure.
I really appreciate that.
I really enjoyed the Craigellachie, but that Royal Brackla is fantastic. And then Yeah, the Aberfeldy. I'm not going to pick it. I'm not going to pick a favourite.
Nah, it's a difficult one.
It is.
I really challenged you.
It was great. I'm also now, you know, well, it's 5 o'clock.
Ready for bed, I
I'm ready for a kebab in bed.
I have to admit, I've tried all three now. I've just tried the Brakla. I really like the Aberfeldy.
Isn't it? It's
the
great.
Aberfeldy was spectacular. I really enjoyed that. If you had to gun to the head and you had to say you can only have one, I would have to.
You'd go with that one.
Again.
Well, I have to say as well, what I'll say is we turned up at a whisky festival as probably the only people here as exhibitors that didn't have any whisky to give out. But what we have done is we've been kindly gifted this from Bevy. So what I'll do, you can pick from our, you can pick a dram out of our whisky
any number between 1 and 12.
Here we go.
We've had a folio, Macallan folio 5 out of that one as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's some good drams in there.
Well, let's see what we get.
If it's not what you like, don't be too disappointed.
Oh, you're right.
There we go.
There we go. Not so easy to do one-handed.
So seaweed and eons? And digging and fire and castring?
That's right.
Let's have a wee look. So yeah, seaweed and aeons and digging and fire and no commas there. Seaweed and aeons and digging and fire and castring.
Well, look, thanks for the whiskey, mate. You can take that away.
You guys are too good.
Please don't feel like you've got to open it here.
You thought I was messing that up, didn't you?
That's going to require a Google, I think, to find out exactly.
I'll let you know how I get on with that one.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I'll let you get back to your stall. Cheers. Thank you very much, mate.
Thanks,
Go on,
lads.
Cheers.